Welcome back.
What up, saucers?
What up?
We love you. We're back.
Back. We love you. We
And
still love you.
We're going to have a fun time today.
Yeah.
I'm going to say that right now. We're going to have a fun time because we're going to talk about the healing. I was going to say the healing nature of nature.
Yeah, that works.
But I don't know if that's
The nature of nature.
the healing nature of nature.
Yes, and especially after the wild year and a half, 2 years that we've all had. Shit got wild. And
It got weird.
And even if in the big picture of things, there have been positive shifts in your life or like mine since the beginning of the pandemic, like really big things have changed in good ways that I cannot deny. And yet I'm still left with this, like, I need to get away. I need to focus more time on calming my mind. And it's just like, I know we've talked a lot about mental health and anxiety on the show, but, and a lot of times in regards to therapy or like a lot of paid services that are great and that help. However, like it can be so simple as just getting outside more often. And it's really hard when you live in a sprawling urban environment like LA but it's not impossible. I mean, we're right by, there's mountains right like 2 hours away. There's a beach 45 minutes away.
Yeah, it's like easier for us than like my East Coast friends that are just like,
right.
Get me the fuck out.
But honestly, like even Central Park, like,
true.
It's like
going
sprawling
for
areas. Yeah, just neighborhood walks. Even so,
and it's also interesting. Sorry to cut you off. Like we're on like kind of sort of on two different sides of this, or coming at this at two different sides. Like you work all the time, and like so you barely have time to like go out and see nature. And me, I'm in my fucking house all day. Like my therapist is literally like, let's try and go out for a walk next week. Like it's just like she's just like, what about going for a walk?
Nudging
and I'm like,
you.
I walk my dog. That's all you're gonna get out of me, because like I was a Girl Scout, right? Like I can be an outdoors girl, but like I think it's just because of the pandemic, I need to do it way more often, and I'm not cognizant of it. I'm kind of just like, fuck it.
And there are so many different ways to do it. Like you don't have to be like intense hiker, backpacker, camper, like really out in the wilderness. I mean, you can have a nice little, you could stay at like a luxe Airbnb, but that's just kind of like has the woods right outside and you turn your phone off, or like,
that's my favorite.
Yeah. That like, there's so many situations that provide those benefits. And so, today we're kind of focusing on like psychological research that's been done that proves, the benefits of spending time in nature and improves our understanding of how time in nature can affect our mental health and sharpen cognition. So exposure to nature has been linked to a host of benefits that we know of, including improved attention, lower stress, better mood, reduced risk of psychiatric disorders, and even upticks in empathy and cooperation.
I mean, like we were just talking about like, I won't get into too much of like my past few months, but it's been hectic.
Crazy.
And I've been like going to doctors and stuff like that because I just have a lot of anxiety. And like just getting like workup and checkups done to make sure it's nothing else. And like all my doctors are just like, just so you know, like this is everybody right now.
That's crazy to me.
This is everybody. And like
it's not, but it is like
it isn't,
to
but
that
it
degree
should.
Where you're going to a specialist, you're concerned. And for them to say that this is actually normal right now is alarming.
Like everybody is having adjustment disorders. It's like the thing. It's like the hot new thing. It's like adjustment disorder is the new black, basically. And it's been really hard. So it's like, obviously you're in a pandemic, you're quarantined for so long. You're going to feel anxious. You're going to feel not yourself. And I mean, the science is there of like what is going to happen to you. Prolonged periods of not being outside and not being around people and not being in nature. It's horrible.
It is. And it creeps up on you. It does creep up on you because like before you know it, you realize that this deprivation is ruining or running your life or ruining your life.
It really is. And that's the sad thing. It's just like, wow, like you don't think that it's going to, and then it does. And then you're like,
Yeah.
crying in the
I know.
doctor's office. Anyway.
Next thing you know, you're in tears in the doctor's office. But for real, I mean, it's not even, it's very real. And
shit is real.
So interacting with nature has cognitive benefits. So University of Chicago psychologist Mark Berman, PhD, and his student Catherine Schertz explored in a 2019 review. They reported that green spaces near schools promote cognitive development in children, and green views near children's homes promote self-control behaviors. See, these are like, we all know the broad stroke, like nature's good for your emotional state and your, but like, what is that? What actual things is it helping develop? And I found this really interesting in children. Why would it be related? Having green views near your home, not even like you being in the park, but green views actually promotes self-control behaviors. And adults assigned to public housing units in neighborhoods with more green space showed better attentional functioning than those assigned to units with less access to natural environments.
Wow.
And experiments have found that being exposed to natural environments improves working memory, cognitive flexibility, and attentional control, while exposure to urban environments is linked to attention deficits. And that's no surprise.
Sick.
But it is, researchers have posed a lot of theories as to why.
This was interesting.
Yeah, like why these cognitive benefits occur. And the answer is likely a combination of all of these theories. It's not like one person figured it out, but so the biophilia hypothesis argues that since our ancestors evolved in wild settings and relied on the environment for survival, we have an innate drive to connect with nature. I fully believe that.
Yeah.
We are beings of this planet. We weren't born into concrete jungles. Like our species wasn't just dropped into an
industrial revolution.
Exactly. So it's like this. So that's one aspect of it. The stress reduction hypothesis says that spending time in nature triggers a psychological response that lowers stress levels, and that's proven. That's also an aspect of it. A third idea, attention restoration theory, holds that nature replenishes one's cognitive resources, restoring the ability to concentrate and pay attention.
Yeah, that reminds me of this one study that was going around like not long ago where they posed this picture of basically this cul-de-sac, but it was kind of zoomed out. So it's just, a bunch of houses. They all look the same. And you can see like the landscape, but it's nothing. It's just all flat land as far as the eye can see, and just houses that like in a row that all look the same. And everybody had like a really bad reaction to looking at it. And it's like linked to exactly what you said. It's like, you don't function properly statistically if you grew up in a house like that.
Yeah, cookie cutter development.
Yes. Like, because there was no variety in your landscape. There was no greens at all. It's like you had an uptick in mental health disorders. Growing
ADD,
up.
Depression.
And a lot of those are found in like places like Nevada had a lot of like housing developments like that. I mean, even where I grew up in South Jersey was pretty like flat land, but there was a lot of trees, like the Pine Barrens is right next door. So I did have
did each house
green
look different? Because there's so many.
The house looked. I didn't live in a development. I was just like
that actually makes a big difference too. Because it's like, I was thinking when I was doing research for this episode, like I was remembering being little and walking home from school, for example, something that you did every day outside, like whether like sometimes I'd walk to my mom's office after work, or I'd walk home from school at different times in my life. And that was before we all had cell phones and social media and all of that. And I remember these walks, I would learn all that you're left to do is just to walk and think.
Yeah.
You just walk and think at the end of every day of school. And I would learn, I remember everything's memorized, like this corner right here, this crack in the pavement, this tree that's right here.
How long was that walk?
Oh, a couple blocks.
Yeah.
Like nothing crazy, but it's like you start to remember certain things. Like I'm remembering one walk home and it was like, when I get to this corner, I know that the sidewalk does this little weird lump thing. And I know that this tree right here is shaped weird and has a weird branch. And I know that this house in the window, there's usually a cat right there. And in this, and it's like, you're just taking in your surroundings.
Yeah.
Well, and it's kind of like autopilot. Like you're not really thinking about it, but the more you do it, you learn that walk. And now when people if you have a regular walk that you do right now, chances are, even if it's just to your car, chances are you don't really notice a lot of the details around you because you're on your phone.
Yeah.
Whether you're talking on the phone or you're looking up directions before you get to your car, or I think about this a lot. Even going from my apartment down the elevator through the lobby to the parking lot, I'm like, I saw something the other day that I was like, has that always been there? And what is wrong with me? Like, this is what's wrong with all of us.
No,
I've lived in this building 4 years.
100% I'm like that with the walk from here. Ryan, I don't know how he does it. But because he's like always on his phone, but he knows details as well. So I don't know what the fuck happened to him. But me, I don't notice that stuff at all in those walks because of that fact. And it's just like, I mean, my block is not very exciting. Like walking around here.
That's the point. Is like, it's not even exciting things.
I know. And it's like, so so that's exactly what goes through my head when I'm like, all right, I should take walks. But it's like, the hospital's right there.
Yeah.
It's like the Scientology building's right there. And who wants to walk past a Scientology building? Nobody.
It's true.
But like, you had the walk. I attribute like my happiness as a child was like Girl Scouts and going to Girl Scout camp in the woods. Like I loved that shit.
God.
I felt so at peace. Camping and being in the wilderness. And I'm still like a girly girl and I like to glamp and stuff like that. But like, fuck it. Like I love being in nature.
Was like my whole childhood.
Yeah.
Backpacking and camping and hiking was.
You were more hardcore than me.
My parents are real hardcore about it. But it was like you would go for days like backpacking where you don't like shower for 3 days and you come out and like wash off in a river and then go get a burger 3 days later when you all like drive out of the wilderness. But it's like that kind of stuff to the point where like we'd be on cross country trips, road trips in the summers and camping along the way where a hotel was like it's like a luxury. Like, can't we just stay at a hotel one night? But I'm very grateful. And this thing that like my parents always valued and instilled in us that's what Girl Scouts was, because you learn that like there's a difference between needing things and like just what people think they need is very skewed. You really don't need a lot. And if you decide to have certain things in your lifestyle later, that's great. But to know that you don't need them is the important thing. And just going out into the woods with
I mean, it's so good. It's so beneficial for you for so many reasons. And this is why my white noise machine plays sounds of nature.
Yeah.
Even the sounds of nature may be recuperative. Berman and colleagues found that study participants who listen to nature sounds like crickets chirping and waves crashing. Waves crashing is my favorite. My favorite. Performed better on demanding cognitive tests than those who listen to urban sounds like traffic and the clatter of a busy cafe, which is like so funny because I know a lot of people that like their white noise machine has honks, has the cityscapes.
No.
Like sometimes like people like find that comforting, and me coming from like I grew up mostly in South Jersey, which is like farmland, and then I moved to New York. So like I understand the city noise, but like I don't fucking miss that shit.
Recuperative. It's not regenerative.
I mean, like some people I feel like consider it, but it has to be the number has to be way down. But literally, like my white noise machine has cityscapes on it. And I'm like, who in their right mind?
That's crazy.
And aside from cognitive benefits, exposure to nature also has emotional and existential benefits that are impossible to ignore. In a study of residents of Denmark, which
they rank the top.
They're the happiest people. And I think I've talked about, like, you've been to Denmark too, right? Like they're so happy.
They're so happy. And they're outside all the time.
It's infuriating.
Yeah.
What were you going to say?
I just said they're outside all the time.
They're outside all the time. Researchers use satellite data to assess people's exposure to green space from birth to age 10, which they compared with data on individual mental health outcomes. The researchers examined data from more than 900,000 residents born between 1985 and 2003. They found that children who lived in neighborhoods with more green space had a reduced risk of psychiatric disorders later in life, including depression, mood disorders, schizophrenia, eating disorders, substance use disorders. And for those with the lowest levels of green space exposure during childhood, the risk of developing mental illness was 55% higher than those who grew up with abundant green space. Hello.
So excessive. And I used to attribute a lot of, well, I still do attribute a lot of like who I am, for example, to my parents traveling with
Yes.
us when I was young. But especially in this research, I guess I hadn't really thought about it, but the outside time, then like
It's
wild nature shapes you in a way that you're not even realizing.
I don't know people that are like outdoors people who are unhappy.
You know what?
I don't.
You're right.
I mean, no one's perfect and everybody has their
No, but you're right.
issues, but like generally speaking, like what would you do? Oh, I went backpacking. You know, they're never going to be like
and anxious.
I fucking hate my life too, by the way. It's like, you know what I mean?
Right.
Like, it just doesn't happen.
It doesn't happen.
And that's why, like, my biggest thing in therapy right now is literally walking out the door.
Yeah.
Like, she's just like, Alyssa, please do it. Like, I promise you. And I'm like, nah.
Yeah,
Like,
exactly.
And I don't even know why I fight it. I'm stubborn. But I mean, the data speaks for itself. It has so many benefits.
Yeah.
And there has to be a correlation. This is sort of off topic, but the same sort of data applies to the food that we eat.
Yep. Yeah.
And well, not really, because the more organic and from nature our food is, and like me too, like you don't have to be like a vegetarian or a vegan or anything, the better health, the better quality of health you'll have. Like there was like this whole thing that happened. I think this is like the early 20th century, where gluten was introduced. I forget after which war. But gluten was introduced to this region. Fuck. I'm fucking this up a little bit, but I think the Caribbean, I can't remember, but gluten was introduced, and they used to have like, really healthy people because they was relying on fruits, vegetables, like grains and stuff like that. Well, and then bread and dairy was introduced. That's a very important thing. So it's like a lot more gluten, a lot more dairy, and then schizophrenia and mental health disorders skyrocketed in this region. I think it was like a few islands off the coast in the Caribbean, I believe. Don't quote me on that, but yeah, it's like
there's so many ties to it, and it's like, I mean, even down to like, for example, here in the States, if I have a lot of dairy, I notice it immediately. I cut it. I didn't completely cut it out because I love me some cheese.
Oh God!
But I cut out a lot of dairy in my life like years ago because it makes me. I break out. I notice it in my face. I break out, and it's directly tied to dairy.
Yep.
But however, when I go to Europe, and I drink a latte in France with whole milk, and I have all the brie,
different.
I do not break out. I do not break out
that is
at
a
all.
thing.
And it's because of the way they're raising their livestock. And that is another thing. It's like
their chocolate tastes different. Their chocolate has a lot. There's a chemical in our chocolate that's like literally like rat poison, I believe.
Yeah,
it's like really bad.
Nestle uses it
to like prolong the shelf life, I believe, of the chocolate. Because our farms are like middle America. So when they reach other states, that's why they need the shelf life. So they have this like really toxic chemical that they put in our chocolate so it could not be stale by the time it gets to your door. But in Europe, it's not like that. So that's why everything's more fresh, and they just
you don't get
better care of their people and their animals.
Yes.
But anyway, there is a strong connection between time spent in nature and reduced negative emotions. This includes symptoms of anxiety, depression, psychosomatic illnesses of irritability, insomnia, tension, headaches, and indigestion. A lot of those I relate to.
It's crazy because you'd think like indigestion, then you're like, okay, I'm thinking of food now, and I'm thinking of, but just being outside, actually, if so many things are so connected, we think they're separate and they're not.
Indigestion specifically, my therapist is like, every one of my clients has indigestion.
Wow.
Like psychosomatic indigestion.
Yeah.
And everyone thinks it's something like
Physical,
really bad, physical.
Yeah, I mean, it is physical, but yeah.
Or, it's terrible.
And nature also can help with the grief process. This is because exposure to nature causes better coping, including improved self-awareness, self-concept, and positively affected mood. And that, honestly, growing up, I do remember, especially in middle school, like some of the hardest years where kids are just mean and your self-perception can be really skewed and insecure. And we go on these like weekend backpacking trips or just like camping trips and get completely away from everything. And it would remind me, like, the first day or something, like Friday after school, parents pick me up and we go hike into the woods for like a couple nights. And then, but like the first day, I'm just like thinking about school and I'm feeling like an insecure 12-year-old, like I would at school. And then by the end of the weekend, I'm just like,
recharged.
I'm recharged, but I'm reminded of my place in the world. Like it said, improved what did it say? Self-awareness and self-concept. And it's like, all of a sudden I'm like, oh yeah, that's not what actually matters. I am as much a part of this world as this tree is, and I belong here. And
you return to yourself.
Yes. And those are thoughts that like, especially in your developmental years, like if you don't ever get out of, you just go from school to home, school to home, school to home, and you're going through these hard things. And at school, like you don't get the chance to shift your perspective and remind yourself of where you stand in the universe, what matters.
Yep. And we all know by now that tons of screen time and nature deprivation are directly associated with depression, and more unexpected are studies that associate screen time with lack of empathy and lack of altruism. And that's just like, I mean, it goes without saying that would be a natural reaction to just staring at, your computer all day because you're so dissociated from humanity and people. Like, I think to like YouTube comments and trolls that just will like fucking send you death threats and all these things because they don't really see you as a person. Because it's a screen and you, and then
they have no empathy because they're just typing something.
Yeah. And,
more awareness is being brought to this issue, and more services and resources are being offered to city dwellers. There's a company that my friend recently just showed me called Getaway, and it's getaway.house online. So they offer unplugged getaways within 2 hours of most major cities in the U.S. Their plug, they say, at Getaway, we believe in making space for more free time. Just 2 hours outside major cities, Getaway's cozy cabins provide restorative stays in nature where you can take a break from work, Wi-Fi, and routines and enjoy the company of those who matter most. And it's kind of like Airbnb, but it's specifically for this purpose of just disconnecting. Like I said, they don't have Wi-Fi. They have a landline in each cabin.
Yeah.
So, you have that, but also it's just encouraging, like just unplug, just stay at 1-2 nights by yourself with a loved one and just don't do anything else. And it sounds so simple. Yeah, you can go camp. Also, a lot of city people don't even know. They don't know how to do that. They don't have a tent. They don't know how to set it up. They're not going to plan a camping trip, and they don't have the gear. You don't even need that. Yeah. And you can then you go to Airbnb then there's Wi-Fi and there's a TV and Netflix is set up and everything like that. A lot of Airbnbs have that. It's great. But this is like specifically for this reason, just unplug.
Yeah, I love this idea so much. It makes me think of our honeymoon, which we went to like a lot of different places in Europe and, mostly bustling cities. And then our last stop was in Skye, Scotland, which is the Highlands of Scotland.
So dreamy.
And it's heaven. It's like just mountainous and it's just so fucking beautiful. And we didn't have like any service. And we spent like an extra day there. And it was so good to like, that was our last stop because it ended up being our favorite low key, like because of how recharged we felt. It was just like, we would just be silent, just walking along a river, a ferry, what was that ferry lake? I forget what they called it, but it's just gorgeous.
Yeah.
Ferry fields, everything's a ferry, ferry, whatever. Ferry mountains in Scotland, like they're just gorgeous and
quiet.
And it was just like, honeymoons can be stressful. We came off the wedding, everything's stressful, but to land there last, it was just exactly what we needed. And like something like Getaway is perfect for that.
Yeah.
Not sponsored.
Yeah, not sponsored. Open to it.
Open to it.
So for our charity nonprofit this week, we're doing Active Minds, activeminds.org. It's the nation's premier nonprofit organization promoting mental health awareness and education for young adults. They're dedicated to saving lives and to building stronger families and communities through education, research, advocacy, and a focus on young adults ages 14 to 25. Active Minds is opening up the conversation about mental health and creating lasting change in the way mental health is talked about, cared for, and valued. What has guided and distinguished them from the start is a belief that young people will be the drivers of change. Active Minds is present in more than 800 schools, communities, and workplaces nationwide, including 550 student-led chapters. Their programs and services empower young adults to reduce the stigma surrounding mental health, create communities of support, and ultimately save lives. And I think that to reduce the stigma is massive because I know our generation is slowly, it's kind of very common now, at least in LA, for millennials to be going to therapy. But when we were growing up, that was not discussed. It was stigmatized even when we were growing up. So I love the idea of generations after us coming up with that as the norm.
Yep. I concur. Like even myself, and I'm like, because you'd think you'd have this stance and you apply it to yourself where it's like, no, please talk about it, please be open, but get the help that you need. But like when you apply it to yourself, you're like, nah, I don't know if I feel comfortable when it's
I don't really need, it's not that bad.
Yeah, and there's no shame in your mental health game. So yeah, follow us on IG and Twitter at the SOS Pod, and subscribe to us on YouTube, SOS with Molly and Alyssa, and subscribe to us on Spotify, Google, Apple Podcasts, anywhere you find podcasts. We are there, and rate and review us. It helps us reach more people.
Yes. I'm Molly Cottrell.
I'm Alyssa Rosano. We're on Patreon.
Oh, yeah, we're on Patreon.
Almost forgot. We're on Patreon, guys.
Yeah, $3 a month, $7 a month, $11 a month. You'll have access to our merch when it drops, extended interviews for guests that we could just talk with forever.
Yes.
Bonus content. And it's really shout out to Nancy, Steve, and Nija.
We love you. Thank you for being patrons. And we're going to shout you out too if you're a patron. So get on that, guys.
I am still Molly Cottrell.
And I'm still Alyssa Rosano.
And here's the turning meltdown
into magic.